In the quiet, wealthy town of East Hampton, there stands a house that once looked like it belonged in a magazine. It had wide porches, long wooden shingles, tall windows, and a view of the Atlantic Ocean that stretched out like a painting. The house was called Grey Gardens, a name inspired by the soft gray of the sand dunes, the gray mist from the sea, and the pale flowers that once filled the gardens. For many years, it was a place of beauty, comfort, and elegance. But behind this lovely name and beautiful location lies a story unlike any other. It is the story of Edith Bouvier Beale, whom everyone called Big Edie, and her daughter Edith Bouvier Beale, who became famous as Little Edie. What happened inside this mansion is a mix of privilege, loneliness, stubbornness, creativity, heartbreak, and unbreakable family bonds. The family. Behind the house. To understand Grey Gardens, you have to understand the family who lived there. The Beales were not ordinary people. They were part of the American elite, connected to politics, wealth, and high society. Big Edie was the sister of John Black Jack Bouvier III, who was the father of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. That means Big Edie was Jackie's aunt, and Little Edie was her first cousin. This connection alone made the Beales a well-known and respected family. They had money, status, and a name that carried weight. People in East Hampton viewed them as refined, cultured, and artistic. Big Edie loved to sing and perform. She believed she had been born with a talent meant for the stage. Little Edie, meanwhile, dreamed of being a famous actress and dancer. In the early days, their life was full of excitement and possibility. But things changed very slowly, almost without anyone noticing at first. Financial problems began to creep into their lives, relationships grew strained, and somewhere along the way, the glamorous life the Beales once knew slipped out of their hands. The birth of Grey Gardens. The story of the mansion itself begins long before it fell into disrepair. Grey Gardens was originally built in 1897 as a beautiful 14-room shingle-style home. It sat on 4 acres of oceanfront land, surrounded by tall concrete walls imported from Spain in 1913 to protect the gardens from fierce coastal winds. The first owner, Mrs. Robert C. Hill, designed the gardens with the help of landscape architect Ruth Dean. They selected flowers in gentle shades, pale blues, soft purples, light pinks, and silvery greens, to match the gray walls, the dunes, and the seaside fog. The gardens were filled with climbing roses, lavender, phlox, delphinium, and wooden arbors covered in vines. When the ocean breeze passed through the flowers, the whole property looked like a watercolor painting. This quiet, beautiful world was the one Big Edie fell in love with. She and her husband, Phelan Beale, bought the house in 1924, ready to spend their summers by the sea. They hosted friends, threw parties, and enjoyed the calm luxury that East Hampton offered only to the rich. For many years, Grey Gardens was full of life. Music drifted out of open windows, guests gathered on the porch, lanterns glowed softly at night during long summer evenings. It was a place that seemed like it could never fade, but slowly, everything changed. The decline begins. The strongest blow came when Phelan Beale divorced Big Edie in 1946 by sending her a telegram from Mexico. Instead of a long conversation or a proper meeting, the news arrived in a short message. For a woman who had spent her life in society circles, this must have felt like a deep wound. Although Phelan sent a small monthly allowance of $300, equal to about $5,000 today, it was nowhere near enough to care for a large estate. The bills kept rising, repairs were ignored. The gardens, once so carefully designed, grew wild and tangled. Vines crawled up the walls, trees grew into the paths. Flowers that had once been arranged with care now fought their way through weeds. Inside the house, things changed even faster. As the money dried up, Big Edie could no longer maintain the rooms the way she once had. Dust gathered on the old furniture, paint peeled from the walls, fabrics faded and tore. The warmth and music that had filled the house were replaced by silence, except for the sound of the ocean and the cries of animals that wandered in. Little Edie returns home. During the 1940s, Little Edie lived in New York City, hoping to become a performer. She loved dancing, modeling, fashion, and theater. She created her own clothing styles using scarves, brooches, and bold colors. People said she had both beauty and talent, but success never fully came her way. When Big Edie became ill, Little Edie returned to Grey Gardens to help her mother. What she expected to be a short stay turned into a lifelong commitment. By the 1950s, mother and daughter were living together in the mansion, with very little money, no staff, and no modern repairs. The isolation of the house grew. The garden swallowed the pathways. The roof began to leak. Rooms were closed off because they were too damaged to use. And slowly, cats, raccoons, and other animals began to make their home inside as well. Inside the mansion, as it fell apart, what happened inside the house became one of the most shocking parts of the Grey Garden story. By the 1960s, the interior was almost unrecognizable compared to its early days. Some rooms were filled with broken furniture stacked to the ceiling. Other rooms had no working lights and were lit only by candles or the sun through a cracked window. The kitchen stove had fallen through the floor into the basement. Toilets no longer worked, and the plumbing was completely broken. Cats walked freely across the counters. Raccoons lived in the attic and walls. Food was often stored in the unusual ways because the refrigerator barely worked. Clothing, old newspapers, photographs, and personal belongings were piled everywhere, making it impossible to see the original floors or carpets. Even with all the damage, Big Edie and Little Edie stayed. They believed that the house was their home, their history, and their destiny. They sang, argued, cooked, fed their animals, and talked about their past as if nothing around them had changed. To them, Grey Gardens was still alive. The raid that changed everything. In 1971, the Suffolk County Health Department received reports of unsanitary conditions at the estate. When inspectors arrived, they found exactly what the rumors described: a house filled with garbage, animals, broken structures, and no working utilities. The story quickly spread through national news. Newspapers printed photos of the decaying mansion. Reporters wrote dramatic articles about the reclusive mother and daughter living in a collapsing house. But what most people didn't know was that these two women were not strangers to fame. They were deeply connected to one of the most prominent families in America, and one member of that family stepped in. A famous family steps in. When news spread that Big Edie and Little Edie were living in terrible conditions, people were shocked. Newspapers showed pictures of peeling walls, overflowing trash, and wild animals crawling through the rooms. Most people in America had never heard of Grey Gardens before, but suddenly, everyone wanted to know who these two women were and why they were living this way. That was when the truth came out. The women were not random strangers. They were part of the Bouvier family, one of the most well-known families in the country, and connected to that name was one of the most famous women in the world, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, the former First Lady. Jacqueline, known to millions as Jackie Kennedy, grew up visiting East Hampton during the summer. She knew the area well, and she also knew the Beales because they were her relatives. Big Edie was her aunt. Little Edie was her first cousin. They had attended family parties together, laughed together, and shared the same family history. So, when Jackie and her sister, Lee Radziwill, learned what was happening at Grey Gardens, they did not see strangers living in a decaying mansion. They saw family members in trouble. No matter how complicated the relationships had been over the years, the bond was still there. The threat of eviction. Even with their family connection, the situation was extremely serious. After the health department inspected the house, East Hampton officials issued an eviction notice. The notice said Big Edie and Little Edie could not continue living in the house until it was cleaned and made safe again. The house had no running water, no working heat, broken floors, falling ceilings, and countless animals living inside. The risk to health was enormous. The town was prepared to forcibly remove the two women if they did not fix the situation. But the Beales had no money, not enough to repair the house, not enough to hire workers, and not enough to leave. They were trapped inside a place they loved, but could no longer control. Jackie and Lee arrive at Grey Gardens. This was when Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis and Lee Radziwill stepped in to help. They did not do it for publicity. They did not do it to appear in newspapers. They did it because they felt responsible for the two women who had once been part of their childhood, their family gatherings, and their memories. When Jackie arrived at Grey Gardens, she saw the damage with her own eyes. Broken window panes rattled in the wind, paint peeled off in long strips. Cats wandered freely. Raccoons stared down from the attic beams. The once beautiful gardens were now so overgrown that the pathways had disappeared under vines. The sisters offered something simple but powerful: help. They paid for repairs, cleaning, and the removal of debris. They hired workers who restored the electricity, fixed the plumbing, removed dangerous trash, and repaired the structure of the house enough to satisfy the town's requirements. They also made sure Big Edie and Little Edie could continue living in their home without being thrown out. It was a turning point. Without Jackie and Lee's support, Grey Gardens might have been boarded up, condemned, or demolished. But instead, it survived, just like the two women who lived in it. A film crew enters the story. While the house was being cleaned and repaired, something else happened that would change the way the whole world viewed the Beales. Filmmakers Albert and David Maysles, known for their honest and unscripted documentaries, learned about the situation. At first, the plan was to create a film about the Bouvier family's glamorous summers in East Hampton, the childhood memories of Jackie and Lee. But when that idea was canceled, the Maysles brothers noticed something else. The Beales themselves were living, breathing stories. Their personalities were captivating. Their conversations were strange but poetic. Their relationship was complicated, emotional, and full of history. Their daily lives inside the decaying mansion were unlike anything captured on film before. The Maysles asked to record Big Edie and Little Edie, not just in staged interviews, but in their natural routines, feeding cats, singing songs, talking about the past, and arguing in the way only mothers and daughters can. The Beales agreed. Inside the house, through the camera's eyes. When the filmmakers stepped inside Grey Gardens in 1973, they found a world frozen in time. Each room showed a different chapter of the mansion's long story. In what had once been the grand dining room, the elegant table was now covered in old newspapers, cans, plates, and clothes. Instead of crystal glasses and silverware, there were cat dishes and mismatched items piled high. The living room, which had once held parties with laughter and music, had parts of the floor missing. Half the room was unsafe to walk in. The other half was filled with stacks of books, broken chairs, abandoned paintings, and empty boxes. The original hardwood floors were hidden under years of debris. The hallway leading upstairs still had beautiful wooden banisters, but they were chipped and scratched. Some steps creaked loudly, others bowed under weight. Raccoons often walked along the upper landing, completely comfortable in their unusual home. The bedrooms showed signs of their old beauty. There were carved bed frames, lace curtains, old lamps, trunks filled with letters, and warped floorboards. But dust covered almost everything, and the once luxurious fabrics had faded into pale shades of their former colors. In Big Edie's room, the air was filled with the scent of old perfume, books, and memories. She kept her favorite records close by and loved to sing in bed, performing like she still had an audience. In Little Edie's room, colorful scarves hung from the bedposts, mirrors leaned against the walls, and clothes were arranged in creative ways. This was where she invented her famous costume designs, turning sweaters into skirts, towels into turbans, and brooches into centerpieces. The kitchen was one of the most shocking rooms. The stove had broken long ago, and parts of the floor beneath it had collapsed. Food was kept in unusual places, and the smell of animals drifted through the space. Every corner of the house told a story, not just of decay, but of the two women who refused to abandon their home, becoming icons through film. The Maysles brothers filmed the Beales for 6 weeks. They did not ask them to repeat lines, pose for shots, or pretend. Everything the audience would later see was natural and real. The documentary, released in 1975, was called Grey Gardens. Audiences were fascinated. People found themselves mesmerized by Little Edie's dramatic speeches, unusual outfits, and mysterious charm. Her voice, her movements, her expressions, everything she did felt like a performance, even when she wasn't trying. Big Edie, lying comfortably in her bed with her cats, acted like a queen commanding her crumbling kingdom. She sang, argued, reminisced, and laughed with a mix of pride and sadness. The film showed the world not just a house in ruins, but a complicated mother-daughter relationship filled with love, frustration, and dependence. Some viewers felt sympathy, others judged, but nobody ever forgot. Life after the documentary. After the release of the 1975 documentary, life inside Grey Gardens changed in unexpected ways. Suddenly, Big Edie and Little Edie were no longer hidden behind crumbling walls and overgrown gardens. The entire world now knew who they were. People recognized their faces, repeated their quotes, and became fascinated with their unusual lifestyle. Some viewers saw them as tragic figures, trapped by circumstances they could not control. Others found them inspiring, admiring their courage, their humor, and their refusal to give up the home they loved. And many simply found the pair unforgettable. Two women who seemed to live inside their own world, keeping their spirits alive even as their house fell apart. But inside Grey Gardens, the daily routine remained mostly the same. The Beales still lived among their many cats. They still sang songs, reminisced about old times, and argued like a mother and daughter who could never quite separate. Yet now, visitors occasionally drove by, hoping to catch a glimpse of the legendary home. Every now and then, someone would mail a letter, send a gift, or try to meet Little Edie, who had become a cultural figure almost by accident. Even with this new fame, the problems inside the house did not disappear. Repairs done earlier only covered the most urgent issues. Much of the mansion remained damaged, rooms were unsafe, the roof still leaked, and the overgrowth in the gardens continued to swallow the land. The home was still beautiful in its own strange way, but it had become impossible to ignore the reality. Grey Gardens was falling apart faster than its residents could save it. The death of Big Edie. On February 5th, 1977, the house changed forever when Big Edie passed away at the age of 81. Her death was a turning point, not only for the story of Grey Gardens, but for the life of Little Edie, who had spent decades caring for her mother and sharing the strange, isolated world they built together. Without her mother's presence, the house felt emptier. The singing stopped. The arguments stopped. The conversations that once echoed through the rooms faded into silence. Grey Gardens had always been unusual, but now it became something different. A shell filled with memories. For Little Edie, the change was overwhelming. She had lived most of her life in this house, tied to her mother's needs, emotions, and expectations. Now she faced a difficult question: stay and continue living alone in a decaying mansion, or leave and start a new life somewhere far away. Choosing between the past and the future was not easy. Grey Gardens held her entire history, but it also held years of struggle, loneliness, and decay. Trying to sell the mansion. Facing the truth, Little Edie decided she had no choice but to put Grey Gardens on the market. But selling the property was far more complicated than she expected. Most buyers who showed interest had only one plan: demolish the old mansion and build something new. The house was in such terrible condition that they saw no reason to save it. The land alone, 4 acres near the ocean, was incredibly valuable. To them, the house was nothing more than an obstacle standing in the way of modern development. But Little Edie refused to accept that. She could not bear the thought of bulldozers tearing down the place where she had grown up, laughed, cried, danced, dreamed, and fought with her mother. She insisted she would only sell to someone who promised to restore the mansion, not destroy it. One buyer after another walked away. It seemed impossible to find someone willing to take on the enormous task of saving a house that was practically falling apart. But then, in 1979, a couple named Ben Bradley and Sally Quinn arrived. The new owners enter the story. Ben Bradley, the executive editor of the Washington Post, and his wife Sally Quinn, a writer and journalist, were captivated by the property. They had heard about the famous Beales. They had seen the documentary. They knew the house was full of history, both beautiful and strange. Where others saw a problem, Sally saw potential. She believed Grey Gardens could be restored to its original glory. She made Little Edie a promise. The house would not be demolished. It would be saved. That was all Little Edie needed to hear. The selling price was $220,000. equal to about $1 million today. For the condition the house was in, the price was almost symbolic. What mattered most was the promise. With the sale complete, Little Edie faced one last decision. Should she clean out the house before leaving, or leave everything exactly as it was? Leaving Grey Gardens behind. According to Sally Quinn, she gave Little Edie two choices: leave the house broom clean, or leave everything exactly where it was. Little Edie chose the second option. The thought of sorting through decades worth of memories, happy moments, painful years, old clothes, family treasures, and countless belongings was too emotional. So she simply walked out the door. She left behind furniture, boxes, photographs, letters, books, broken items, clothing, wicker chairs, antique tables, artwork, dishes, and a lifetime of personal belongings. Even the attic was packed from floor to ceiling with forgotten objects. When Ben and Sally entered the house after the sale, they described it as discovering a shipwreck. Every room was filled with debris and treasures mixed together. There were raccoon droppings in the attic, cat waste throughout the house, a stove collapsed through the floor, and entire rooms blocked off because they were filled with garbage. It was one of the most extreme home restoration challenges anyone had ever seen, restoring the mansion to life. Despite the enormous amount of work, Ben Bradley and Sally Quinn were determined to save the house. They hired teams of workers who spent months removing trash, cleaning floors, repairing walls, and restoring rooms. They also revived the gardens, rediscovering pathways and replanting elegant flowers. Slowly, Grey Gardens transformed from a decaying ruin into the magnificent estate it once was. The restored home soon appeared in architectural magazines and home decor publications. People were amazed that a mansion formerly filled with raccoons, collapsing floors, and piles of trash could become so beautiful again. Grey Gardens, which had survived so many years of neglect, finally had a second chance. Little Edie begins a new life. After leaving the mansion, Little Edie moved to New York City for a short time, then relocated to Bal Harbour, Florida. There, she lived in a modest apartment far from the cold winters and harsh winds of East Hampton. She enjoyed peaceful days by the water, took long walks, stayed in touch with fans, and created friendships with people who admired her story. Although she no longer lived in Grey Gardens, she carried the memories with her. She wrote letters, reflected on her life, and continued feeling proud of her independence. Even without the mansion, she remained an icon, known for her resilience, her unique fashion, her expressive personality, and her unforgettable presence in the documentary. Grey Gardens enters a new era. Once the restoration was complete, the mansion entered an entirely new chapter. Gone were the days when broken furniture filled hallways and raccoons made their home in the attic. Gone were the stacks of newspapers, the decaying floors, and the smell of animals drifting from room to room. For the first time in decades, Grey Gardens looked alive again. When people walked by, they could hardly believe it was the same house they had seen in newspaper photographs years earlier. The windows sparkled in the sunlight. The garden paths, once completely swallowed by ivy, were open again. Flowers filled the air with color and fragrance, just as they had in the early 1900s. The porch was repaired, and soft ocean light fell across the wooden shingles, giving the house the warm glow it once had long ago. But even in its restored state, the mansion carried memories of the women who lived there, memories that could not be washed away by fresh paint or new floors. Every room held a story. Every corner echoed with history. Whether people walked through it or simply admired it from the outside, Grey Gardens always felt like a place where the past was still breathing. The rooms come back to life. The interior of the newly restored house was astonishing. When workers had first entered, many rooms were filled with damaged objects and broken items. But after the restoration, each room became a tribute to the mansion's original beauty. The dining room, once covered in decades of clutter, was polished and bright again. The long wooden table that had lost its shine was restored to a rich, glowing finish. Sunlight from the tall windows flowed across the room, making it feel grand and elegant, just as it had when Big Edie and Little Edie first moved there in the 1920s. The living room, which previously had a partially collapsed floor, now felt spacious and welcoming. The architectural details, carved beams, tall windows, and original wooden trim, were carefully repaired. The room no longer held piles of books and broken chairs. Instead, it looked like a proper East Hampton parlor, ready for quiet conversations or gatherings. The bedrooms upstairs were especially meaningful. They had once been filled with personal treasures, forgotten objects, and clothing scattered everywhere. After the restoration, each room felt peaceful and calm. In what had been Big Edie's room, the walls were repainted in soft tones, and the sunlight made the space feel warm. Even though her personal items were no longer there, the room still seemed to hold her presence, her singing, her humor, her strength. Little Edie's former bedroom was transformed as well. Clean floors, fresh paint, and restored windows created a bright, airy environment. Yet, even with the changes, it was easy to imagine her colorful scarves, dramatic outfits, and expressive energy lingering in the air. This was the room where she had danced, dreamed, and created her famous fashion combinations. The kitchen, once the most damaged room in the entire house, was completely rebuilt. New floors replaced the collapsed boards. Updated appliances replaced the broken ones. Clean white cabinets took the place of rusted and deteriorated shelves. It became a real kitchen again, fresh, functional, and full of life. Every restored room felt like a victory, a reminder that even when something falls apart, it can still be saved. A house that became a cultural symbol. As the years passed, Grey Gardens transformed from a decaying mansion into a cultural landmark. People who had seen the documentary traveled from all over the country to visit the street where the famous house stood. Some walked quietly past it, imagining the days when Little Edie fed stray cats on the porch, or when Big Edie called down from her upstairs bedroom. Others took photos, hoping to capture a piece of the mansion's magic. But Grey Gardens wasn't just a house with a strange and compelling past. It became a symbol of survival, individuality, and the unpredictable paths life can take. The story of Big Edie and Little Edie touched people because it wasn't simple. It held beauty and sadness, comedy and tragedy, glamour and decay, all at once. The documentary was turned into a Broadway musical, an HBO film, books, stage plays, fashion editorials, and academic essays. Artists admired Little Edie's unique style, her scarves, her skirts, her confident voice. Scholars studied the mother-daughter bond and what it revealed about aging, independence, and emotional struggle. Film lovers praised the documentary for its honesty and rawness. More than anything, people were drawn to the human story inside the walls of Grey Gardens. This was not just a tale about a house falling apart. It was about two women who refused to let go of their home, even when the world outside moved on without them. Little Edie's final years. Far away from East Hampton in her Bal Harbour apartment, Little Edie spent her later years in quiet surroundings. The warm Florida sun suited her. She would often walk along the water, wearing outfits she designed herself. Even in her older age, she kept her creative spirit alive. She loved writing letters to friends and fans, reflecting on her past, and reading about new projects inspired by her life. Although Grey Gardens was no longer physically hers, she carried the house in her heart. She sometimes spoke about the good memories, her mother's singing, the beautiful gardens, the long summers by the sea. But she also remembered the challenges, the loneliness, and the weight of living inside a place that had become both a home and a prison. On January 14th, 2002, Little Edie passed away at the age of 84. She died quietly, far from the crumbling rooms and wild gardens of her youth. Yet even after her death, she remained an icon, a symbol of individuality, resilience, and eccentric charm. Once Grey Gardens is sold, again. In 2017, after decades of living in the restored house, Sally Quinn decided it was time to move on. Her husband Ben Bradley had passed away, and the mansion, though beautiful, required constant care. She put Grey Gardens on the market for just under $20 million. When the house was listed, people around the world began talking about it again. They remembered the documentary, the photographs, the famous quotes, and the unforgettable characters. The estate became the focus of interviews, articles, and tours. Many wondered who would become the next owner, and whether they would honor the legacy of the Beales. In December 2017, the house was sold for $5.5 million to fashion designer Liz Lang, who appreciated the mansion not just for its beauty, but for its cultural significance. Under her care, Grey Gardens continued to host parties, charity events, and visitors enchanted by its history. The mansion became a place of celebration, a bright future built upon a complicated past. The lasting legacy of Grey Gardens. As the story of Grey Gardens continued into the 21st century, the mansion was no longer just a house on the edge of East Hampton. It had transformed into something much larger, a symbol known across the world. People who had never even visited Long Island still recognized the name. They knew the story of Big Edie and Little Edie, their extraordinary personalities, and the wild, collapsing home they refused to abandon. Grey Gardens became a legend, not because of its architecture, but because of the people who lived inside it. The mansion's faded walls and overgrown gardens captured something human. A mixture of sorrow, comedy, stubbornness, courage, and creativity. The Beales' lives revealed what can happen when dreams collide with reality, when families drift apart, and when people hold on to the past with everything they have. The house had become an unforgettable character in its own right. What made Grey Gardens so different? There were many Gilded Age mansions in America, more luxurious, more expensive, or even more beautiful than Grey Gardens. But very few had a story like this one. What set the mansion apart was the unusual combination of elegance and decay, glamour and ruin, celebration and sadness. Inside its walls, days did not follow a normal routine. Big Edie might be singing old songs while lying in her bed, surrounded by cats. Little Edie might be dancing around the room in her homemade outfits, turning scarves and sweaters into dramatic fashion pieces. Arguments could turn into laughter. Complaints could turn into poetry. No visitor ever forgot the strange, almost theatrical atmosphere that filled the home. The house became a reflection of its residents, charming, chaotic, mysterious, stubborn, and unforgettable. Why people became fascinated with Little Edie. Although both women became well known after the documentary, Little Edie captured the world's imagination the most. There was something magnetic about her, something that felt both vibrant and tragic at the same time. She had once dreamed of becoming a performer in New York City. She wanted to dance on stage, model for magazines, and act in theater. She had the looks, the style, and the personality. But life pulled her in another direction, tying her to her mother and the collapsing house she could not leave. In the documentary, people saw her flair for drama. They heard her sharp, expressive voice and watched her make clothing out of whatever she found in her room. Towels, brooches, skirts pinned together from sweaters. She moved like someone who had lived 1,000 lives inside her imagination. Even the way she spoke felt like poetry. She could talk for hours, switching from jokes to memories to sudden bursts of emotion. Her style became iconic. Designers, artists, and performers admired her originality. What may have looked unusual to some people actually revealed a spirit that refused to be broken. She did not follow fashion. She created it herself. Even decades after the film's release, people continued to quote her lines, imitate her outfits, and write books and articles analyzing her personality. She had become something rare in American culture, a true original. Big Edie's complicated strength. While Little Edie received most of the public attention, Big Edie had a powerful presence of her own. She was a woman who had once been full of energy, music, and charm. She loved singing and believed she had been born to perform. She filled the house with old records, sheet music, photographs, and memories of glamorous days long past. On the surface, she appeared demanding, dramatic, and stubborn. But she also had warmth, humor, and a deep love for her daughter. Their relationship was complicated, sometimes affectionate, sometimes tense, yet impossible to separate. They relied on each other emotionally, financially, and mentally in ways that outsiders often misunderstood. Even in the darkest times, Big Edie held on to the belief that the world had not forgotten her. She wanted to feel adored, celebrated, and recognized. And in a strange way, through the documentary and the decades of fascination that followed, she eventually received the attention she always craved. Inside the restored mansion, what visitors see today. Although the house has changed owners and gone through major restoration, people who visit or view photographs of Grey Gardens today often say the same thing. The spirit of the Beales still lingers in the air. The interiors no longer contain broken furniture or piles of forgotten objects. Instead, restored rooms show off the mansion's beautiful early design. The wooden floors shine again. The staircase is sturdy and elegant. The bedrooms are light-filled, airy, and calm. The kitchen, rebuilt from the ground up, looks modern yet respectful of the home's history. Visitors often imagine how the Beales once moved through these spaces. They picture Little Edie sweeping past in her scarf-wrapped outfits, or Big Edie calling out from her upstairs bedroom with her cats curled around her. Even without their belongings, the house feels like a museum of their lives, not because it displays artifacts, but because the structure itself holds their memories. Why Grey Gardens still feels magical. There is something almost mystical about the mansion. People who study it say that Grey Gardens represents the collision between dreams and reality. It shows how fragile wealth can be and how quickly a life of comfort can turn into one of isolation. But it also shows resilience. Even when the house collapsed, even when the gardens turned wild, even when the roof leaked and the floors cracked, Big Edie and Little Edie refused to leave. They stayed because the house was part of who they were. Many people admire that loyalty, even if they don't fully understand it. Others see the story as a reminder of how important family connections can be, and how powerful they remain, even when life becomes complicated. And for many viewers, the Beales' lives feel like a cautionary tale about money, fame, and the pressures placed on women in society. Whatever meaning people find in the story, Grey Gardens continues to inspire fascination and emotion. The mansion in modern culture, the Beales' story produced far more than a documentary. It became a creative spark for filmmakers, writers, musicians, designers, and actors. A Broadway musical brought the story to life with songs that captured the intensity of the Beales' personalities. An HBO film starring Jessica Lange and Drew Barrymore introduced the story to a new generation. Fashion designers referenced Little Edie's unique style in runway collections. Scholars wrote essays exploring the themes of independence, decline, and mental health. Even now, social media accounts share clips of Little Edie dancing, talking, or creating outfits. Younger audiences discover the documentary and become instantly drawn to the unusual world inside the mansion. Grey Gardens, once nearly forgotten and left to decay, became a global cultural touchstone, a story that continues to grow. The story of Grey Gardens is not finished. Every year, new articles, tours, films, and discussions appear. People debate the choices Big Edie and Little Edie made. They talk about whether the documentary was fair or intrusive. They wonder how different their lives might have been with more support, more money, or different opportunities. Grey Gardens lives on because the story does not offer simple answers. Instead, it leaves people thinking about family, aging, identity, dreams, disappointments, and the homes that shape our lives. The mansion stands today as proof that even when everything seems lost, there is always a way for history to survive. Looking back at the rise and fall of a mansion, when people reflect on the history of Grey Gardens, they often see it as a story about a house that fell apart. But in truth, it is much more than that. It's the story of two women who tried to hold on to their identities, their memories, and their dignity even as everything around them changed. The mansion went from a glamorous summer retreat to a collapsing maze of broken rooms. But behind every cracked ceiling, every fallen beam, every dusty antique, and every shutter that banged in the wind, there was a piece of the Beales' lives. Grey Gardens became a symbol of how quickly fortunes can fade, but also of how strong the human spirit can be. Even when the house was falling into ruin, Big Edie and Little Edie stayed, because it was the one part of their lives that still felt like home. And in the end, the house survived. Not perfectly, not easily, but with a history so powerful that it became larger than the building itself. What the Beales taught the world. The story of Big Edie and Little Edie is full of contradictions. They were wealthy, yet they lived in poverty. They were isolated, yet the world knew their names. They were mocked and judged, yet also admired and loved. They were both trapped and free at the same time. People who watch the documentary often walk away with very different feelings. Some see sadness, others see bravery. Some see two women who lost their way. Others see two people who refuse to let society decide how they should live. Through their words, their singing, their arguments, and their memories, they showed the world what it looks like to keep going, even when the world no longer makes sense. And the heart of it all was always the same. A mother and daughter who loved each other fiercely, even when they didn't understand each other. Their bond, messy, emotional, imperfect, kept them together through decades of hardship. Inside the emotional walls of the mansion, it's easy to focus on the physical details of Grey Gardens, the broken floors, the raccoons, the piles of belongings. But the emotional walls were even more complicated. Big Edie had always lived with a sense of grandeur. She believed she deserved admiration. She loved attention, music, performance, and the idea of being adored. Even when she was older, she still held on to the confidence of her youth, refusing to see herself as powerless. Little Edie, on the other hand, carried dreams that had been put on hold for so long that they almost became ghosts inside her. Her talent was real, her beauty was real, her imagination was bright and unstoppable, but fate tied her to her mother, and to the house that refused to let her leave. Their lives wound together so tightly that neither one of them could truly separate from the other. Even when they argued, even when they felt frustrated or misunderstood, they continued to share their days, their meals, their stories, and their hopes. Inside Grey Gardens, every room held a part of their hearts. What inside the house revealed about them. Visitors who entered the mansion during its worst years often described the interior as chaotic or shocking. But the rooms also revealed something deeper, a living museum of the Beales' personalities. In Big Edie's room, the clutter of letters, records, framed photographs, and books showed her longing for the attention she once had. She kept old sheet music close by, as if she could perform again at any moment. Her bed became her stage, and the cats curled around her feet became her audience. In Little Edie's room, scarves draped over the furniture, mirrors propped against walls, and outfits pinned together with brooches painted a picture of a woman who never stopped creating. Even in decay, she found beauty. Even in isolation, she found style. Her imagination filled every corner, turning a collapsing bedroom into a runway. The hallways, once polished and bright, revealed the passage of time through their worn boards. The stairs groaned underfoot, as if echoing the years of footsteps from family members long gone. The kitchen, with its broken stove and sagging floor, showed how hard everyday life had become. But even there, Little Edie danced, cooked, sang, and carried on. Every inch of the house told the truth. The Beales never stopped living, even when the world expected them to disappear. The power of the documentary. When the Maisels brothers released Grey Gardens, they didn't just share a film. They opened a window into a world nobody had seen before. They showed viewers a story that was strangely beautiful, strangely sad, and strangely funny, all at the same time. People couldn't stop talking about it. The Beales instantly became cultural figures. Their quotes were repeated everywhere. Their outfits inspired fashion designers. Their strong personalities sparked debates about independence, aging, and mental health. For many viewers, the documentary didn't feel like entertainment. It felt like entering someone's private life, almost too personal, too intimate, too real. That was part of its power. It forced the world to pay attention to two women who had been ignored, dismissed, or forgotten. And the film gave the Beales something they had never expected: immortality. A house saved from oblivion. When Ben Bradlee and Sally Quinn restored the mansion, they didn't just repair rotten wood and crumbling walls. They saved a piece of American history. They preserved a story that would have been lost if the house had been bulldozed. By rebuilding Grey Gardens, they made it possible for future generations to understand the Beales' lives. They made it possible for visitors to walk through the rooms and imagine the past. They brought color and order back to a house that had once been defined by chaos and collapse. Even though Little Edie never returned, the restoration honored both women. their memories, their struggles, their stubbornness, and their fierce attachment to the home. The house in modern times. Today, Grey Gardens stands not as a ruin, but as a restored and beloved landmark. It is a place where parties are held, guests gather, and gardens bloom beautifully once again. The home appears in magazines, news articles, and online tours. Visitors admire the elegant living room, the restored dining room, the bright bedrooms, and the welcoming front porch. And even though the mansion is clean, polished, and repaired, people who walk through it often say that it still feels like the Beales are there somehow, laughing, singing, arguing, or telling stories, just like they did decades ago. The spirit of the house never disappeared. It simply became quieter. The final reflection. Grey Gardens is more than wood, nails, flowers, or walls. It is a story about dreams that didn't come true, about love that refused to die, and about the courage to keep going even when the world seems to crumble around you. It is also a reminder that every house holds secrets, every family has struggles, and every life is more complicated than it seems from the outside. Big Edie and Little Edie lived a life that most people will never understand, but they lived it honestly, loudly, boldly, creatively, and without apology. And in doing so, they left behind one of the most unforgettable stories in American history.